But first, another day, another massive crisis for the reckless, incompetent Joe Biden and his administration. America's banking system and your money is now in peril. This is a very real crisis. There are real fears tonight that this could very well be just the beginning of a massive Biden banking crisis with Biden billionaire bailouts and worldwide consequences. 2 banks now have officially collapsed. Nearly 24 others, they were forced to halt trading today amid widespread panic. First Republic Bank stock had plummeted a whopping 60%. $100 billion was wiped out in one single day. At the very core of all of this banking crisis is Joe Biden's record-setting 40-year-plus high of inflation caused by his multi-trillion-dollar spending spree. And remember, Biden inherited a very low inflation rate of 1.4%, and his horrible energy policies drove inflation to one record high after another, all 40-year record highs. And Biden inflation has been anything but, quote, transitory, as they told us. Now, this followed by, 1,700% increase in the rate increases in terms of the Fed. The first financial institution to fail, the Silicon Valley Bank, saw its massive holdings in U.S. Treasuries and mortgage securities, quote, hit hard by the Fed's aggressive interest rate hikes caused by Biden inflation, which still remains uncomfortably high. It is still not under control. But according to Joe Biden, it's not just his fault. It's transitory. Instead, guess who he's blaming? Not hard to figure out, but take a look.
During the Obama-Biden administration, we put in place tough requirements on banks like Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, including the Dodd-Frank law to make sure that the crisis we saw in 2008 would not happen again. Unfortunately, the last administration rolled back some of these requirements.
Okay, first, Joe Biden is lying. If these regulations were so effective, he had over 2 years to reinstate them. With the Democratic House and Senate, no banks, by the way, this large, no bank failed under Donald Trump. In reality, multiple Senate Democrats, they voted to ease these restrictions, including Senator Tim Kaine and John Tester and Claire McCaskill and many others. Even former Congressman Barney Frank, remember him? Dodd-Frank, he lobbied in support of the exact regulatory rollback as a board member at Signature Bank, which was the second financial institution to collapse today. Now, the bill that was changed, that's right, it was the Dodd-Frank bill. Now, in 2017, in an op-ed for CNBC, let's look at what Congressman Barney Frank wrote, quote, there is one legislative issue on which I am strongly supportive of a change that will benefit Signature, raising the $50 billion asset level at which a bank becomes subject to the extra supervision. So you got a former Democratic firebrand, Barney Frank, co-authored the Dodd-Frank bill, was instrumental in removing the oversight at a bank that has now collapsed that he's on the board of. And we're supposed to believe this was Donald Trump's fault? Now, the bottom line is this. It was Joe Biden, not Donald Trump, that caused inflation to spiral out of control, and that created the tenuous situation for all banks in our economy. It was Biden, it was not Trump, who sat around and did nothing as one expert after another was warning about a looming disaster. They all lied. They said, no, it's transitory, it's temporary, it's not real, don't worry, it'll go away. In fact, analysts at J.P. Morgan, they actually issued a warning specifically about Silicon Valley Bank in November of last year. So how did J.P. Morgan know while the Biden administration remained totally clueless? Oh, that's right. The people who work in the Biden White House are stupid and incompetent, but they're also political. Maybe these are Silicon Valley friends of theirs. It will get interesting in the days to come when we find out how much money was donated by who, and if anybody involved in these bank failures, in fact, donated big dollars to Democrats. Instead of preventing crisis with expert analysis and sound policies, they always blame Donald Trump. They even blame him for the border crisis they caused. They blame Trump for what? Record-setting illegal immigration? No, the border was secure under Trump. They blame Trump for Biden's record-setting inflation? No, it was 1.4% when Donald Trump left office, they went all the way up to 9.1%, one 40-year high after another. They even blamed Donald Trump for the war in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin didn't invade Ukraine when Trump was president. They even tried to blame him for the toxic train derailment in East Palestine in Ohio. Even the Washington Post was forced to call out this blatant lie. But that's not going to stop them from repeating the same lie over and over and over again. Whatever happened to the buck stops here. If the dog bites, the bee stings, and if you're feeling sad, it is all Donald Trump's fault, according to Joe Biden. Take a look.
You take down regulations, you water down regulations, you weaken the power of the administration to deal with freight railroad companies, and then you show up wanting to be a great friend of the people who have been impacted by a rail disaster.
We must repair the damage that was done by the last administration, the mismanagement that was done by the last administration.
There's a bit of a different tactic, a bit of a different approach, and that's probably why President Biden and not his predecessor was able to rally the world and the global community in taking steps against Russia's aggression.
We were able to determine that China has a high-altitude balloon program for intelligence collection that's connected to the People's Liberation Army. It was operating during the previous administration, but they did not detect it. We detected it.
The president inherited a mess because of what the last administration did. We inherited a mess. And, Republicans in Congress made it worse by blocking comprehensive immigration reform.
Taking blame for inflation? No.
Why not?
Because it was already there when I got here, man.
Come on, man. Now, when they're not passing blame and shirking all responsibility, the White House is just flat out lying and pretending that an obvious crisis is not really a crisis at all. We don't have a crisis at the border. The border is secure. We saw it in Afghanistan. We see it with inflation. We saw it with the supply chain crisis. And now we have the Biden banking crisis is no different. Take a look.
Americans can have confidence that the banking system is safe. Your deposits will be there when you need them.
The American banking system is really safe and well capitalized. It's resilient.
And the head of the OMB said the same thing. Sounds like they read the same talking point memo. Now, secure and resilient. Okay, two significant banks, one the 16th largest in the country, has collapsed, with two others now facing a similar fate. According to Jen Psaki, the situation is so urgent that Biden started working at 9 a.m. It was a big day for Joey. I'm sure he's asleep by now. He probably had his ice cream and went to bed. Take a look.
Now, it's important to note, President Biden does nothing at 9 a.m. He is a night owl. So the fact that he is doing this at 9 a.m. anyway speaks to how vital the White House recognizes it is for him to have his voice out there, conveying that to the American public.
A night owl? Okay, I'm not buying that lie for a minute. At his early morning presser, well, your President Joe claimed there would be no bank bailout and that the taxpayers would not be on the hook. Over the weekend, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said exactly something similar. Take a look.
During the financial crisis, there were investors and owners of systemic large banks that were bailed out, and we're certainly not looking, and the reforms that have been put in place means that we're not going to do that again, but we are concerned about depositors and are focused on trying to meet their needs.
All right, what changed, Janet? Because 24 hours, actually less than 24 hours later, the White House has completely bailed out Silicon Valley Bank. The administration doesn't know what they're doing. And last week, Janet Yellen was in Ukraine. For the past year now, she's been focused on a global minimum tax. Joe Biden has been checked out pretty much from day one. But now fear not, because every tech startup, Vineyard and uber-rich celebrity with millions of dollars that they banked at the Silicon Valley Bank, they will now be reimbursed full. And they say it's not going to cost you a penny. You will pay every penny It will come from you, the American taxpayer. That is their biggest lie, that taxpayers won't be bailing out Biden's billionaire banker buddies, because you will be. Now, no word if there will be any legal or financial consequences for those in charge of SVB, but the shareholders, they're now suing the CEO and the CFO for fraud. Now, keep in mind, by the way, that was a quick lawsuit. Keep in mind, this is a bank that had no official risk officer for 8 months, a bank that just committed $5 billion to finance carbon neutral operations, a bank that paid out bonuses only hours before the collapse on Friday, a bank that hosted an exclusive dinner at an expensive steakhouse the night before they collapsed to celebrate South by Southwest, and a bank with executives that sold millions of dollars worth of stock just 2 weeks prior to the collapse. Coincidence or just good luck? Or maybe not. Anyway, now this bank full of Biden donors has been bailed out by the Biden administration, really by you, the American people. Do you think that you will receive similar treatment? Are American farmers, are they getting this kind of treatment? Are American ranchers getting this type of treatment? American truckers getting this type of treatment? Healthcare workers in our hospitals with their vaccine mandates, they getting this kind of treatment? No. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.